Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for coming to this session on revisioning journalism's business model problems through a solutions lens. This is a somewhat left field way of thinking about how we share information about successes and failures in monetising journalism in a way that others can use. We've been brought together thanks to Alec Salins, who's the Head of Impact at the Solutions Journalism Network. And Alec, I know you're here, so could you just stand up for a moment? There he is. Thanks so much. And if you've got a moment, just have a chat to Alec afterwards. One of the things he's working on is how do we demonstrate the revenue impact of doing solutions storytelling, so he is your man. My name is Corinne Podger and I manage training at the Walkley Foundation. It's an Australian journalism non-profit. My deck will present a framework for thinking about how we cover journalism about journalism in a way that helps others avoid reinventing the wheel. We're also going to hear about 3 examples of the way solutions journalism itself can help boost the bottom line. So it's a bit meta, bear with us. Our 3 panellists will share case studies focused, each in turn, on social impact, business impact, and editorial impact of doing solutions journalism. My fellow panellists are Dina Abu-Ghazala, who is the CEO and founder of EGAB in Egypt, Anita Lee, CEO and founder of the Green Line in Canada, and Lisa Erlbauer, who's head of training at the Bonn Institute based in Germany. And just a quick note about Anita, she was unable to join us due to flight delays, so she's recorded a video of her presentation in the airport in Toronto this morning. So there'll be a bit of background noise with that, but just bear with it. Well done, her. So just a quick overview of solutions journalism. It leads with the response to a problem and how it works. It provides available evidence of results. How effective is it? It presents insights that can help others decide if this response would work in their context. And it needs to also include limitations. So something that works in country X might not work in country Y. We also want to pay note to constructive journalism, which is very similar. It has 3 elements to a story, that there is a focus on solutions, it draws in multiple perspectives, and that it covers constructive dialogue around an issue, and more on that from Lisa shortly. So solutions in constructive journalism has been used to cover some of the issues on this slide here to great effect. We know that these things resonate really well with audiences, that as well as covering a problem, we explore what is being done to address that problem. Everything from education to youth issues, banking, agriculture, and so on. Now, I don't know about you guys, but this stuff keeps me awake at night. Job losses, the emergence of news deserts, and what all of this means for democracy. It impacts on us in a personal way. We know people who lose their jobs. It affects their families, their mortgages, and their lives. But unlike so many industries, our industry is critical to democracy. It's critical to healthy societies, so it has to survive. So I had an idea. Can we apply solutions journalism as a lens to journalism's business model problem? It's, in some ways it's no different to plastic pollution or climate change. It's a problem that we need to solve. So I think there are 2 steps to this. One is that we need to change how we write about business models. And so when we're covering journalism about journalism, we need to add these kinds of questions. How did the response aim to solve a business model problem? What evidence was gathered about what worked or didn't work? What insights would other people need to know to have a go at it themselves? And what limitations would they need to consider? So just sit with that for a moment. And then the other thing is to make business model solution stories easier to find. So we need to quickly be able to find the news that we need to use to prevent news deserts, to protect democracy, to safeguard jobs. And I don't know if you've ever tried to go find information. If you're a trainer, you know that you go and look for materials to put together a slide deck, and sometimes it's a 404, and sometimes it's behind a paywall, and sometimes it's just not there at all. And this slows down our ability as an industry to move quickly, and we know that we do need to move fast. So I had an inspiration. This is not what will definitely happen. It was just one of those things you go, you know, there's actually a solution story tracker. In 2019, I came here to Perugia, where the story tracker was introduced, and it's now a searchable database of 16,000 stories from journalists from 193 countries, and everything that's on the tracker is Creative Commons. I thought, that's a really good idea. And then this year I thought, maybe we could filter for things around journalism business models in a database that might be something like the Solutions Journalism Tracker. So if I can search for an issue area like climate change, why can't I search for an issue area like journalism subscriptions, or journalism leadership, or journalism and AI disruption, and so on? Now, it doesn't have to be an existing tool. I just know that we need one. And it needs to be free. It needs to be international, it needs to be multilingual, and it needs to be practicable, so that we're not struggling so much to find the information that we need. I've finished very quickly because I am the moderator of this session, and so I'm going to hand over now to Dina Abu Ghazala, who is the CEO of IGAB in Egypt, and she'll talk you through her case study, which is looking at the the social impact of solutions journalism storytelling. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corinne. So we thought we don't want this to be just a theory. It's a great idea that Corinne initiated, but we want to give you some examples from 3 different continents. So I'm from Egypt, and I started IGAP to solve this problem. So we all know that the global news industry really faces a myriad of problems. You have financial pressure, ads revenue is going down, pushing most outlets to a subscription model. But the problem is, how would you compete in such a crowded market when most of the stories are the same? There is very little differentiation in the market because more or less most media outlets rely on the same sources of story, and that's why we end up seeing the same story over and over in most media outlets. And at the same time, we have thousands of journalism graduates every year. I would say in Egypt, there's 4,000 journalism graduates every year from public universities only. This does not count private universities, etc., and this is one country. There is not enough job opportunities for this annual supply. But at the same time, they have access to original stories that goes nowhere because they don't have enough access to local media and also to international media because the barrier of entry is very high. Sometimes they require international experience, and they can't get this international experience. Also, they require English language. Let's be frank, the international media is dominated by English language media. So you can have brilliant journalists in Yemen or Libya or Syria, but the fact that they don't speak English is kind of like a permanent barrier for them, for their stories to be told to a global audience. And also research tells us, like, I think almost 40% of the audience worldwide avoid the news because it's repetitive, because it's depressing, etc. So here comes the response. A platform that gives news outlets access to exclusive stories by local journals. How? We have an online platform that any journalist across the Middle East and Africa can just sign up on it, and they start pitching their stories. We then review these stories and decide if they are a good fit for international media. But even the stories that we do reject, we tell them why. We give feedback, and we tell them what's missing from these stories to make the cut. Also, after we started operating for a while, we started getting requests for stories from international media, and this is a true story where the CNN actually, as equals, approached us for a story from Rwanda, and then it got published. So really what we're doing here is that we want to create value for both the media outlets and the journalists. We want to help media outlets achieve a more cost-effective global coverage. So instead of having to fly reporters over or create costly bureaus, you have all these local journalists who are on the ground and who know their communities best, who can deliver, but they just need guidance. And you have exclusive access to stories. So instead of just relying on the same wire story that everyone has access to, we give you an original story that you only can publish, which gives you a competitive edge. And at the same time, because we specialize in solution journalism, and I will share some evidence later, our stories are also engaging, and there is growing evidence that this kind of stories also engage audiences. And at the same time, our journalists get to enhance their career prospects by bylines in international media. They get paid better, and they get a chance to tell different stories about their community, stories that they do not see usually published. So what's the evidence that this is working? Well, there are various evidence. So we launched the platform, although EGAP started in, I always say late 2020, but the platform was launched in 2022. So in a year and so, we have more than 500 journalists from over 40 countries on the platform. We have more than 40 media outlets that use our service. And other pieces of evidence, very important, that 20% of the reporters that on our platform has reported that they have managed to land new opportunities after publishing through EGAP. Either they were hired, or they now are freelancing on their own after having a portfolio of several published articles, or they were asked to train on solution journalism. They earn up to 10 times what they get locally, because local rates are very low. Also, their perception of their communities change. So we work a lot, as I said, we work with the Middle East and Africa. Most of the region, unfortunately, is suffering from conflicts, war, and they're always in the global media for all the negative reasons. And this have affected their own perception of their countries, that they stop believing that there is a solution. What happened after introducing solution journalism and them going actively searching for these solutions, that they themselves discovered that, oh, there are many people working on solving their problems, we just don't know of them. And this helped them to change even their perception about their own communities. The reach of stories goes beyond one outlet. So yes, I said the stories that media outlets commission through EGAP are indeed exclusive to them. But this does not prevent another media outlet from referring to that story. And this has happened not locally and in other international media. For example, we published this story with NCIA, which is a solution-focused environment website in the US, about how the efforts to save the dragon tree in Yemen. And then it got picked up by the Yemeni TV and several local Yemeni outlets. So also, it does the round so that these stories also reach local audiences. So it's not just for global audiences. And also, when other media outlets see these stories, they sometimes contact the journalists and ask, oh, can you do that, a similar one from us? So we also help them discover, the journalists discover these stories and diversify their content. 50% of the media outlets we deal with are repeat clients, and this, I think, in itself, if I speak in editorial language, in business language, repeat clients, great, hey, business. But in editorial language, this is evidence that they like the quality of the stories. Because if you don't like the quality of the stories or they're not performing well, you will not use us again. And actually, personally, what I'm most proud of is that since October 7, we've helped 50 stories get published from Gaza. As you know, Gaza is almost inaccessible to international media. But because our model works on empowering local journalists to get their stories out, international media was able to publish stories from such an inaccessible destination like Gaza. But it's not all great. Hey, we do have struggles, limitations, if we apply this social model. Funding is a big problem. Why? Because, unfortunately, there is a negative perception towards for-profit entities. EGAP is a for-profit entity. And for some reason, when I come to journalistic events, I feel like I have to apologize for being a for-profit. I'm sorry, I'm for-profit, but we do have a very strong social impact or social cause. And part of it is because the reality in Egypt actually is very difficult to establish to start an NGO for media to start with. And also because, honestly, why would I start a nonprofit if there are no funding for media initiatives in Egypt? So we had to create our own business model. And I do think it's important to start changing that perception. And I think there is an angle related to solution journalism here as well, because most of the stories we read about the private sector are stories about corruption, about greediness, about harming the public to make more profit. And I think we need to have a balance that it's not all businesses are bad, and also not everything has to be done through the nonprofit lens. There is a space in the middle. We do need all of these actors. Also in a country, and I said these limitations are specific to Egypt because I will not be able to speak, but there's there's 0 grants coming to Egypt. To be all the media support organizations, when you speak to them, say, oh, Egypt, we can't work, it's a very difficult environment. So, and at the same time, we don't have impact investors. This concept is just alien. And traditional investors only look at profit, and media businesses cannot do 30 times profit like traditional or other tech businesses would do. So what's the impact of this is scaling. We would love to be able to help more journalists. We would love to be able to publish more and to reach a scale where we break even and where we can rely on ourselves. But to do that, we need this initial funding that's not there. The other problem that's not funding, because I know many of you already can relate to funding, is that there's the poor quality of journalism education in the region that led to poor local journalism. So one of the things, when I had the idea for IGAB, I thought that the problem was just in connection, in connecting the journalists with the opportunity, perhaps in guiding them. But then when we started receiving pitches, we realized that the problem is much bigger than this. The basics of journalism is not there. Even the ones who studied journalism and graduated from journalism school do not know how to source properly, and we have bigger problems than we can help them solve, and this leads that we spend more time on the copies than we had anticipated. So this is another hurdle, limitation for the model. So what did we learn, have we learned so far? The insights, if I'm using the Sojo model. So developing journalism skills happen over time. There are many organizations working in the space of training, and that's great, but one training program or fellowship does not make it. You need over time, repetitive, consistent feedback and practice. So we have examples of journalists who really didn't know, they even came to us and told us, what is a pitch? I don't know what is a pitch. They graduated from journalism school, doesn't know this term. And over a year of practicing getting feedback, they now are able to write perfect pitches. So it does work, but it needs time. Investment in journalism education in the Middle East and Africa is crucial, really. We were missing that layer. It's almost non-existent. Very limited credible learning sources in local languages. This is another problem. So even when we try to deliver training sessions, we run through the problem that the availability of training resources in Arabic, for example, is very limited. There are things, but they're not credible. So this is another problem. The insight is you can't rely on grants. You have to envision a business model from the beginning. And perhaps I'm going to use here the business statement, which is fall in love with the problem rather than the solution. Because if you fall in love with the problem, you can always change the solution accordingly to make sure that you're actually solving the problem. But if you start with I want to launch a website without understanding why are you launching this website, then you become so stubborn and will not see the feedback or the signals coming from the audience. Finally, a good story is a good story, regardless of labels. What does this mean? Is that editors would commission a story not because it's solutions journalism. Unless you're an editor in an outlet that focuses on solutions journalism, you really don't care if it's called solution journalism, it's called investigative journalism. What they care about is that it's a good story. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll now ask the technicians to play the video from Anita Lee, CEO and founder of the Green Line in Canada. Thanks so much.
Hey everyone, this is Anita Lee here. I am the founder, editor-in-chief, and publisher of The Green Line, which is a hyper-local independent news outlet that's all about investigating the way we live to help young and other underserved Torontonians survive and thrive in a rapidly changing city. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there today with you in person. I was so looking forward to it. I just had a flight mishap, but I will be in Persia for the rest of the week up until Sunday morning if you'd like to chat with me. So yeah, without further ado, I would love to tell you more about the Green Line, and I will share my screen. Great. So the Green Line is a publication that serves young and other underserved Torontonians, and we specialize in community-driven as well as solutions-focused journalism, which I'm going to tell you more about in just a second in terms of how it impacts us, how it produces impact from a civic, editorial, and business development standpoint. So this is our mission. We're all about redefining Toronto through the way we live, and you'll get to understand why we have this mission through our core model, which is our action journey, which incorporates solutions journalism into it. So really, we're trying to get people to take action on the issues that they care about in the city. It's really turning journalism as a passive kind of form of consumption on its head. And really kind of reinvigorating it as a public service that will help people navigate their lives. So this is something we're going to offer, or we're trying to offer as a solution, which is by investigating the way we live, we get to the root of the issues that impact Torontonians the most. And we also collaborate with journalists and creators from the communities we serve to report on solutions rather than problems. And a big part of this is because our core target audiences are Gen Zs and millennials who are 18 to 44. And there's a lot of research, especially about North American young people, about how they are experiencing higher rates of anxiety and depression than their older counterparts. And so journalism is not something that they're embracing. They're actually turning away from it. And obviously, many of you know in this place that the historical kind of tagline for journalism is if it bleeds, it leads. And of course, that's anxiety inducing. That doesn't eliminate pathways forward. So we're really trying to do something different with our model. So these are our target audiences. The core audiences are actually the middle audience and the one on the right. So underserved Torontonians are anyone who self-identifies as being underserved by existing media. This can be from identity-based standpoints or geographic standpoints, as in news deserts, and it also can be just, a shared experience. So if you're a veteran or you're formerly incarcerated. And then on the right-hand side are culture vultures. So these are people who are not typically maybe engaged with the news. They actually come to us because they love the fact that we have fun events, the fact that we actually have an in-house comedian as part of our journalism team or part of our team. And I'll explain why we incorporate this or we appeal to this audience in a bit more detail later on. But this is actually taking a joy-centered approach is a pretty critical part of our model. And then the left-hand side are action-oriented young urbanites. So those are just young people who are the driving force behind a lot of movements that you've seen around the world, whether that's Fridays for Future or Me Too or Black Lives Matter. So this is our attention journey. It's effectively our engagement strategy. And you just want to think of it as an internet rabbit hole. So I'm sure all of you have gone to Wikipedia before. And the whole idea is, whenever you go to a Wikipedia page for something that you might not know a lot about, you start to fall down the internet rabbit hole. You start clicking on the footnotes, you learn more and more, and then suddenly you're an expert on 18th century vases for some reason. And that's kind of the whole idea behind this, where at the top of the funnel, you have your comedy, your op-eds, your behind-the-scenes content to get to know the team. Then one level down, service journalism are how-to guides that navigate life in the city, like finding affordable housing or co-housing, or they might be a profile of a community leader or community organization. And then you also have your original journalism, which is standard kind of 500 to 700 word piece that you might find in a metropolitan daily, except it's tailored to the audience, so in the form of like Instagram slides, for example. And then at the bottom of the funnel is our in-depth journalism. So that could be long form solutions focused journalism, it could be a short form story series, it could be data interactives, it could be a documentary. And these are some examples of that journalism. So the left is an original, the middle is a top of the funnel kind of behind the scenes piece of our former intern and fellow, Catherine Manny, talking about a piece that she reported on. And on the right-hand side is a service piece that's an explainer of Toronto during the pandemic. This is a core part of our model and where we really incorporate solutions journalism. So it's called the action journey, and it's essentially a 4-step process to getting people to take action on an issue or systemic issue facing the city. In a given month, we tackle this issue. And so in week 1, we publish an explainer that breaks down the systemic problem. Week 2, we publish the in-depth piece of journalism. Week 3, we host an event. Oftentimes there's a fun component, whether that's a basketball tournament, film screening, concert, and then we have a discussion, and then My team and I facilitate story circles where we set the table for conversation and help or basically encourage people to discuss in a way that generates solutions or community-led solutions to the problem. And then in week 4, we publish an article that crowdsources the solutions that emerged from the event that were, basically conducted via community surveys. And then we audit that data or analyze it. And then we pull out the 3 major themes that emerged from the community members on the event. And then we reflect that feedback back to members of the public so they can take action on the problem on their own terms. And that also helps inform our ongoing editorial coverage. This is an example of the 4-step process with our very first action journey, which was about living with COVID in Toronto, that launched in April 2022. So we are officially 2 years old now, just passed. And this is a standard survey that we've produced. So I want to talk a bit about events because that's pretty critical to what we do. And it really kind of brings the solutions to life. So this is a concert that we threw as part of our action journey, the 2023 mayoral by-election action journey. It was the second election in about like 6 months that we had because our previous mayor stepped down. And we basically tried to get people to vote because the previous election right before this was had the lowest voter turnout in the history of the city. There's community organizations, there was like obviously live performers. This one was for the 2022 municipal election. And we actually paired political opposites in advance of the event and encouraged them to have one-on-one conversations. And we also had a broader discussion about how to not only combat polarization, but also increase voter turnout in the city. And this was for our September 2023 action journey issue on visual arts in Toronto. So it's really about supporting visual arts infrastructure in the city, as well as arts workers who are being pushed to the margins of the city because they can't afford to live there. This is the response that we've gotten from our audience so far. You'll see a lot of nice things that people have said about us in the form of testimonials, in terms of our formats, and just the way we do news gathering. And most of our audience, about nearly 80%, is made up of Gen Zs and millennials. So that's 18 to 44. They revisit our site more often than other age groups. And then the younger Gen Zs actually have the highest average engagement time on our site at 2 minutes and 5 seconds, with millennials coming in and older Gen Zs coming in second. We also had a lot of vote of confidence from cultural institutions, community organizations, educational institutions, government institutions, and other media outlets as well. So we've had collaborations across the board. Of course, we remain editorially independent, but this is really just a vote of confidence in terms of the type of journalism we do, which includes solutions journalism, especially for younger people. And we've also won accolades and praise from the industry, both in Canada and the US, for our digital journalism, as well as our video journalism that's community driven and solutions focused, and also for the product itself, which, like I mentioned, embeds journalism or solutions journalism into it. In terms of revenue impact, so the Green Line saw a 125% increase in revenue from 2022 to 2023, and we're on track to outpace that growth this year, which is really exciting. We've also successfully diversified our revenue streams, and I'm going to continue to move in that direction. And a lot of this has to do with, I feel qualitatively, solutions journalism. Because of the fact that our funders have expressed that they really enjoy and appreciate this type of journalism that we conduct. And then more importantly, or equally as importantly, our audience. They have overwhelmingly told us that it's a relief to read our stories because it's not just fear-mongering or depressing or just, viral news on the internet. It really has to do with their tangible, real life, daily lives. In terms of challenges and limitations, I would say that tracking direct impact from solutions is something that I'm trying to improve. Like I mentioned, qualitatively, we've gotten this feedback, but we want to be much more rigorous and concrete about how we track that and see a causation rather than a potential only correlation. I also think our model in particular works best with hyper-local or local news gathering. And I think I might extend that to solutions journalism too, although it's obviously great at all levels, because of the fact that with local and hyper-local, it's very tangible solutions. It's something that people can feel like they can actually do something about the situation, and it's within their control. And then finally, effectiveness in getting people to take action. So I'm not saying that that hasn't happened, but again, it's really about tracking the impact and whether it's actually genuinely occurring. And that's something that's really important to me, to see that people are actually finding our journalism and solutions journalism valuable enough that they want to actually take action. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. Again, feel free to get in touch. I'm at hello@greenlight.to. I'd love to talk with you while I'm in Perugia, but also I can definitely make time for a virtual meeting after the fact. Thanks again.
Excellent. And that was Anita Lee, CEO and founder of the Green Line. Anita will arrive tonight on the 2045 public bus, and then she's here for the rest of the conference. So please reach out to her on LinkedIn if you wanted to connect with anything about her presentation. Just make that connection. And I'm very happy now to hand over to Lisa Erlbauer, Head of Training at the Bonn Institute in Germany.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here and tell you something about what I would consider a case study. And just a few sentences about the Bonn Institute. We're a 2-year-old non-profit organization based in Germany. And what we do is that we support organizations for newsrooms in Germany and beyond. So we don't produce journalism ourselves, but we support newsrooms to produce constructive and solutions-oriented stories, and I would like to tell you more about our project that we did together with the local newspaper Rheinische Post and their newsroom based in Mönchengladbach, which is a mid-sized city in Western Germany. And I'm also going to follow the 4-step solutions approach to give you an idea of what we learned throughout this project. And so I really want to talk about the editorial impact solutions journalism can have on reporting. And we used the solutions angle as a new approach to tell well-known problems, as a new approach to find stories about issues that are well established in the city. The newsroom has reported a lot about the inner cities dying. So this is the problem we focused on. It's a widely shared problem in Germany that a lot of storefronts are empty, shops are closing, there's not enough room to live for people, like housing issues, and how can we reuse inner cities for that. So the newspaper has really covered that issue, the problem, from every angle, and we wanted to use the solutions approach to find out who's doing it better. Where can we look at what are places that have found ways to deal with the issues that the city of Mönchengladbach has? So this was like, who is doing it better? It's one of the leading questions that you learn first when you do, for example, a solutions journalism training with our friends at SJN. And this is really the question we took at heart when we started doing our research for stories. Just to kind of give you an idea how this whole project was set, we were working together for 5 months. We started with a 1-day training for the newsroom on kind of setting the foundation of solutions journalism and kind of brainstorming the issues the newsroom wants to talk about, the newsroom wants to report on. And then I would travel to the newsroom every week to kind of support them in their day-to-day practice to create these stories. And in total, we published 20 solution stories in 5 months. Here's like, it's in German, I'll give you an idea of like the stories we talked about. Like I said, it was all about kind of revitalizing the city and the inner city, the downtown area. So some stories we the newsroom reported on is like how a regional currency can help to revitalize the local economy, how you can use temporary use of empty places to revitalize the city. We looked to the Netherlands, which are like the Dutch borders really close to the city. So we looked at 2 cities and wanted to find out what Mönchengladbach could learn from 2 of their cities, from Roermond and Venlo. And we also looked at how recreating the square in front of Central Station can improve security in the city. These are just a few examples of the stories we published throughout these 5 months. And here's also, this is in German, but for German speakers among you all, a link to the workshop report that we published at the end of this project. And it kind of outlines our whole process, as well as giving you tools to kind of do your own constructive, solutions-focused investigation, constructive questions you could ask, etc. So, what's the evidence? How well did the stories perform? We gathered different data points, and we were really excited to see a lot of positive results. So what we did, all these stories were behind the paywall, and we compared them, like the project stories, we compared them to all other stories published in the local newsroom in the same time frame, and kind of, you know, compared how they performed. And what we could see is that people that consumed these solution stories had longer session durations, so they spent more time on the website. It was an increase of 27%. We could also see that the reading time of each story was 9% longer on average. And important to note here that these stories were really comparable in length to other stories, because they're all published online and in the print newspaper, and it was like a title story, like in German you would say an Aufmacher, so you could really compare these story length. We could also see that people reading the project stories really had an increase, like a 4 times increase in the numbers of sessions they would have on the website, and also the engagement was 3 times higher. We learned a lot throughout these 5 months, and I would like to share a couple of points that were really important learnings and that are helpful to kind of keep in mind when another newsroom would like to replicate a solutions approach in their reporting. And I'm sorry about the 4th bullet point. This is, like, unfortunately, I copied the name of the QR code in there and I saw it too late, so there's a couple of numbers. It's the file name of the QR code, and I couldn't change it anymore, so I'm sorry about that. So what we really learned, and I think that kind of ties in what you said earlier, Dina, is like a story has to be a good story. That's the important part. And what we could really see is that's really important, what's really important in our project too. And people really have to care about the issue for it to be a good solution story. So it's not enough to just report a solution you come across, but your community really has to care about the problem you're reporting on. So kind of finding measurable, comparable, and transferable solutions that really can reference to your own community is the building block of like a good story. Otherwise, it doesn't work. What we really learned, and I think that was one of the most fascinating learnings for the newsroom, is that you don't have to kind of find all new sources, really change everything in your newsroom. You can really work with established sources and ask them different questions, like constructive questions. We listed a couple of them in our workshop report. It's like just not only focusing on the problems, but kind of dipping into the knowledge of your sources on who's doing it better, where can we look to, and this is something that really worked well, and that was one of the biggest learnings for the newsroom. It is really important to kind of start doing it, to set specific goals. Like we said, we wanted to help the newsroom publish 1 story a week, so we had like a rhythm and keep ourselves accountable. But also the newsroom figured out that you should be open to publish more stories, because once you start a solutions-focused investigation, you often find so much information that is way more than 1 story could handle. So be open to just have like several stories on the same issue, just to still make it accessible for your readers. It has to be attractive for the audience. And it's also important when you're a reporter wanting to do solutions reporting, especially it's something new you want to learn, be in touch with the editorial leadership and really talk about like hurdles you have, if you need more time, if you need more support, because talking about priorities and resources has to be part of it to make it manageable. Also, what we did is that we involved the audience with one event that we organized on the city square, but also had like announcements in the newspaper to send in story ideas and solutions. And I think that is really important to kind of keep in mind too, on how to kind of engage your audience in a new way. And at the same time create these places for public dialogue on how we can, you know, deal with socially relevant problems of our community. And lastly, be patient and kind of practice to continuously improve the quality of your story. I think like having this idea of like wanting to become more constructive, it's a path, it's not a on and off switch you can just, you know, use, but really a practice to kind of cultivate over the period of time. And this is also what the managing editor said, you know, it's a good way to just start to change your journalistic habits in small steps and just continue to do so. And lastly, a couple of things that we couldn't answer, for example, with our data analysis, like a couple of things the project couldn't tell us. So for example, because we had a set period of time and then published the report, often solution stories go beyond daily news, so kind of tracking how well do these stories perform for a longer period of time, how would the stories perform if they're not behind the paywall, what's the longer term correlation between high engagement that we could see, and subscriptions. And for example, what's the impact of clearly solutions-focused headlines and teasers on media users, to kind of just, you know, play around, test different approaches to how to frame your stories. These are just a couple of examples of questions that we just couldn't answer yet, but would be very interesting to kind of further analyze. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
So friends, we have 9 minutes. It's a hard post at 2:50. Are there any questions or reactions or thoughts that you have that you would like to ask one of us or share with the room? And just while you're thinking, I'll get started if that's okay, but I think this is a really interesting opportunity to quiz people who've perhaps revisioned how we would normally address these kinds of problems. So to look at what's the how of something, what's the evidence for it, what are the limitations for it, and also what are the insights, could this be replicated elsewhere? And so one thing I would also ask you guys to think about is, have you learned perhaps a slightly different approach in this session to thinking about the kinds of questions you might want to interrogate journalism about journalism when you're trying to diversify your media, your monetization sources if you're a newsroom, or how you might educate others if you're an educator. So one of the questions I wanted to ask Lisa is, when you're thinking about overcoming these limitations, and Dina, I'll ask you the same question, so perhaps have a think about it. We know what we, I guess, don't know. Does that then inform an iteration of the work that you're doing? Once you've begun a project, how do your limitations help you define a next step, if you think about them in those terms?
So just to be very practical in this kind of case study, so the Rheinische Post, the newspaper, is one of our partners at the Bonn Institute. And just gonna say it again, the Rheinische Post, the newsroom partner, is one of our close allies at the Bonn Institute. And we're currently working on kind of getting into like the next phase of our work together, and how to actually, you know, find ways to do projects and experiments together that really address these questions. And this is why we also wanted to really clearly post these open questions. You will all find them in the report, to share them publicly, to also kind of keep us accountable, but also open the room for others to kind of investigate these questions.
And Dina?
So on the funding, Is it working?
Dina's going to answer that same question, and then I can see there are two hands, so we'll come to you. Yep.
I'll just go very quickly. I think for the funding question, this has forced us to focus on growing. So I didn't mention this, but we doubled our monthly sales from 10 stories a month to 20, and this year we're aiming to double it to 40. So just kind of like made us persistent to make the business model work. On the education front, we started by putting written guidelines on our website, but then we realized no one reads them. And now I'm thinking of creating IGAB Academy. Like seriously, just having a new thing, 6 months of intensive course for journalists to learn journalism.
Thank you so much. There's a question up the back, sir.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Abbas Mpindi. I come from Uganda. I train young journalists since 2016 in solutions journalism. One of the, on the impact side of things, one of the issues that came up is, people in political spaces being very excited about solutions journalism because it shows only the things that are working. And I guess my question to the panelists and everyone here is, are there people who have used solutions journalism to hold powers to account, to generate a space that we can use solutions journalism to show that it's not just to give people hope and show things are working, but rather also use that space to hold the powers accountable? So if there are any examples, I would love to hear that, and thank you so much.
I might just start with the first part of the question about is it always just covering things that are working? And in fact, one of the purposes of solutions journalism is to interrogate a response with rigour, and that means looking at what's working but also what's not working. I think on the second part of your question with regard to holding power to account, I'll defer to Dina.
Yeah, we did it. For example, we did a story for The Economist about a government plan in Egypt to use solar panels and why it failed. So that was looking exactly that, interrogating the solution, a very ambitious government plan that didn't work, and saying what went wrong in there.
And just to follow up on kind of our work with that, is actually we use these stories that reported on what's working elsewhere in terms of, revitalizing cities. The newsroom confronted the people in power in their city on why they're not doing this. So, and when I spoke later with the newsroom leaders again, it became really clear that kind of the people in power have gotten really uncomfortable with their new way on reporting these issues. And so it's not only about showing that there's a solution, but really then bringing it back to why are you not acting here? It's working elsewhere. Why are you not doing anything?
Mm-hmm.
Can I just add very quickly?
You can. We've got 3 minutes.
Okay. Oftentimes in our communities in Egypt, for example, lack of resources is used as an excuse for not attending to a certain problem. So when you do solution journalism showing a community or a group of individuals or an NGO solving the problem, it's an indirect way of holding them accountable and telling them, well, if that group of people were able to solve it, how can you as a government not be able to solve it?
Please.
Hi. My name is Cindy Nanclares. I'm an independent freelance journalist. And so my question is for Dina, but if anybody else wants to, in the time that we have, contribute. You mentioned how you help freelance journalists use solution journalism. I feel like there's a lot of, in my experience covering underrepresented communities, I found that it is the local journalists that know the community better, that know how to report these problems and the solutions that the communities have come up with themselves. Now, how can we educate some of those outlets to take that approach and to do it more often and better?
Thank you.
Educating local outlets? I think the best way is to show them that they don't need to put extra resources, because they're always afraid, oh my God, I don't have time, I don't have financial resources. If you see, you don't need to put anything extra. And also, if you have examples that show that you can produce quality evidence-based reporting via solution lens. Quite often people are suspicious of solution journalism, saying, oh, we don't want propaganda pieces or promotional pieces. But then when you show them that's not propaganda, it's actually holding power to account and actually evidence-based approach that also tackles the limitations, they're like, okay, I got it. we can discuss this more.
Dear friends, I know there are a few hands up, but we are actually out of time. We have a hard post at 2:50, but that's for the live stream, so you're very welcome to ask us questions after the session. I want to thank all three of our wonderful panellists, so Lisa Erlbauer from the Bonn Institute, Dina Abu Ghazala from IGAD in Egypt, and of course Anita Lee, who's from the Green Line in Toronto. So thank you so much, friends, and have a wonderful rest of the day.